Hey guys, welcome back to Honkai Star Rail with Kafka just around the corner. I wanted to update you on my thoughts on a tier list with the Blade update. I waited a long time for this one because I wanted to test Blade heaps as free to play, also on spending accounts, and see how he operates. So I think I've got a fair idea. I want to talk about the rest of the characters and my thoughts, and like where I think characters will rise and fall with the introduction of Kafka as well. And I will also talk about my thoughts on positioning for Kafka. Obviously, we don't know 100% until we see her, but I'll give you my general thoughts on that at the end as well. So we're going to go through DPS units first. So let's go with Blade S tier. I just think this guy's too good. The other thing is, when we look at tier lists, and in this one, I'm going to consider around E4 on most of the 4 stars. I feel like that's pretty fair. But just note, like E6, I'm going to talk about them at different eidolons anyway when I go through them. But the other thing to consider is when you're doing a tier list is what you're doing it for. I'm trying to consider like every aspect of the game. And something that I think is getting more important to people, me especially, is autoing. So like when I pulled Luocha and Blade on my free-to-play account, and then I could just auto through one side of Memory of Chaos every time, it felt super good. It felt so good. So like that's another aspect that you got to consider in things as well. And I think Blade is just a monster, does huge damage, and he's super reliable. And I think that is just like puts him 100% in the S tier. Then the next one we have in DPS characters is Clara. Clara, I'm going to put in the A tier. I think she's an absolute monster. Clara is one of those characters that I love because early game you can play her as a tank if you don't have the right team or the right investment yet. And then she just scales with your account. Then you eventually get her onto a full damaging build. The one thing with Clara is, yes, she's not going to be as reliable for getting you those 0 cycles, but she's a super strong, reliable character. And if you're doing it in 3 or 6, who really cares? So I think Clara's an absolute monster. Himiko, I'm going to put into the B tier. I just think Himiko's not quite on the scale of some of these characters. I have seen some amazing things with Himiko, so depending on how much investment, like, yeah, you could rank her up a bit, but I feel like Himiko B is a fairly safe place for her. Jing, I'm putting him into the A tier. I just think Jing's an absolute monster. I know there's been a lot going on in the community about Jing and fights and stuff like that. I still think he's good. The one downside to him is obviously his Lightning Lord and the speed capping of it, and also if he gets controlled. But in general, he still hits like a truck, whether it's AoE or single target. I still think he's a fantastic unit in the game. Zila, S tier. Don't have to talk too much about it. We all know what Zila does. We've seen it for long enough. Just kills everything and does massive damage and doesn't really care. So that's pretty much it. Don't really care what they're weak to. We're just going to nuke them anyway. Then we go Fire Trailblazer. Now, I'm probably going to keep this to 4 tiers, and then I'll let you guys decide how you want to separate C tier into C and D tier. I know some people would put him into D. I'm just going to put it all into C because it's too finicky, and I don't care enough to separate C from D tier. They're low, so that's good enough for me. Next up is my man Welty Boy, DPS or support, whatever you want to call him. I'm going to slap him in the A tier. Most people are building him as damage now, and he's got that great support. Works as an offensive/defensive support. Yes, breaking with imaginary or something like that isn't going to be as strong for 0 cycle clears because it delays the enemies into the next cycle and they don't take the extra damage from the break. But in general, the dude's a monster, so he can go there and that's pretty safe. Yang Qing is still amazing. Amazing for breaking, amazing for ease of building for early game right through. And honestly, just the best ice DPS that we have at the moment. Who knows when Jing Liu, I'm sure she's going to replace him. Just like she replaced him in his own story. But, you know, at the moment, I think he's up there at the moment. Then we go to Arlen. I put Arlen in C tier. I have seen some people doing some crazy stuff with Arlen, getting some big numbers. But I still think when I look at the rest of the lightning damage deals, when I put Savol in as well, I think Savol is still just a bit better than him in my personal opinion and my taste, but you could flip those two around eventually. Then we go on to Danny Boy. Danny Boy, if you don't have Blade, he's the best win DPS. I just think he's like one of he's just like a reliable, strong 4-star, and he's very basic, but he's also good at what he does. So I think Dan deserves that B spot at the moment in that tier. As we move on from that, we've got Hook. Now, Hook I'm putting in C tier. The reason is I feel like when you look at him and Himiko, yes, he's more... Sorry. I've called Hook a dude from the very start. I'm an idiot. But yeah, we got her and her. So Hook and Himiko, I feel like I got to separate them, even though Hook's more single target, Himiko's more AoE. I feel like it's right to separate them, and I don't think Hook is better than Himiko at this stage. Then we go on to Herder. I'm going to put Herder in that C tier as well. Honestly, I built a Herder and I loved it. I think Herder's a ton of fun. And you probably could make the argument to push her up because there is no other ice unit up there. But then I think that would rage people towards the fact that Hook's there and Herder's there. So I feel like that's fair. Honestly, Herder could go in either one, but I'll put her down here. And then, like I said, you could separate this. You could put some down to D tier, but I really don't care about making that fine of distinction in the rankings. Then we jump on to QQ. Honestly, QQ at E4, I think she becomes A tier. At E6, if RNG is with you, I think she could be A+ tier, or she could be like B tier. It just depends on the RNG. Now, the thing with QQ at E0, she's definitely either down here or down here. The reason is at E0, people always say, yeah, QQ's RNG. At E0, she's not that much RNG. She's not as RNG dependent because you can pretty reliably, go two full team turns, and then you've got her ready for an enhanced basic without using any skills, and she can be used as a skill point generator. But when you get to E4, it becomes RNG because it's like, am I going to get that 24% proc chance when I use the skill? Because I'm going to start using a bunch of skill points on her now, because if I get that follow-up, it's doubling the damage, and it's really solid. Then at E6, she gains 1 skill point back when she uses it, and that makes her absolutely cracked. But I think E4 with RNG, yeah, I feel like, that's what she is. She's an RNG character. Plus, I'm a big fan. So she's sitting there. Don't argue. So moving on from that, we have Sampo. I think Sampo can go into B tier. Now, in general, like I said, with the elements, I'm trying to separate them with the Hook and Himiko, Arlen, and Serval in a sec. But I feel like these two are different enough, even though they both win damage dealers, that they can both sit in this tier. And Sampo is obviously going to get a big pick-me-up when Kafka drops in the game. So I feel like putting those two there is pretty safe. Sampo, and honestly, E4, he starts insta-procking the wind shear dots. I think he's great. I think he's a great unit all around. Serval, once again, I'm putting her up here. Like I said, I just think she has an amazing kit. She can be used as a basic attack spammer once you get a shock on the enemy. And at E4, you're going to apply the shock with the ult. So you can just use her as a basic attack generator that still does decent damage off of her basic attacks and has really good break capabilities when you need to break AoE. I think she's an absolute beast still. Even though she may not have the raw damage of some of the others, her efficiencies along with what she can do, I think is absolutely fantastic. And then we have Sushang, and Sushang goes into that same tier as these characters. With all the other 4 stars, I think she's fantastic. Crazy break capacity, like her breaking is just absolutely nuts. So I love Sushang as well. Moving on from that, we're going to go into the offensive supports. Bronya, enough said, don't need to do much more than that. Bronya, in addition to it, she's just savage. Okay, that's about it. I need a Bronya, please. Can I get one? Silverwolf, 100%. I feel like Silverwolf is one of those characters that will remain top tier forever. It could be Cope, but even though people say, yeah, but like once you've got a bigger roster and you've got like, a mono team of every element, I still think Silverwolf has a place, because like you just slap her in your best mono team and then it works against anything. Also, just the defense breaks and stuff. And like all her debuffs, it's huge. I think Silverwolf's an absolute monster. Moving on from that, we have Asta. Asta's a tough one for me. I think I'll put her in B tier purely because if the enemy's not weak to fire, she loses a lot. And that's like a big part of her kit. So that's the only reason. If the enemy is fire, she goes into the A tier. But in general, I think we'd place her in the B tier because not everything is fire. And I feel like that's a pretty safe bet. Moving on from that, also, I'm super keen to test Asta with Himiko. I know it's not much, but she does apply a burn. Sorry, not Himiko, with Kafka, because I know it's not much, but Kafka, she applies a burn, so Kafka can trigger that. Also, speed means Kafka goes more turns, which means she insta procs more often. And then also we have the attack buff. I think she's gonna be one of those like sleepy units that like becomes like absolutely amazing with Kafka. But we'll have to wait and see. I don't know. It could be a bad take, but yeah, we'll have to wait and see. Then we move on. Pella, I feel like Pella belongs with Asta. Pella, similar. If the enemy's weak against ice, she's really good. If the enemy's not weak to ice and there's nothing you need to dispel, then I'd never really bring Pella. So Pella is kind of similar to Asta in like she's conditional. I do agree there's more conditions that work because she's got either enemy weak to ice or enemy needs to be dispelled. But I feel like she's like maybe sits like half a tier above Asta, but we'll just put them in the same at the moment. And I feel like that's a fair tiering for them. Then we go on to Ting Yun. I feel like Ting Yun is the next best support after Silverwolf and Bronya on offensive support. She doesn't care what element the enemy is. She does her thing. She's a positive skill point generator because you use skill, basic skill. In general, that's the way I normally do it anyway. She's got the ultimate, which is going to give ult gauge to an ally, which can be used offensively or defensively, so you have the flexibility in it. I think she's still just an amazing all-round unit. Then we have Yukong. I'm putting Yukong down here in C tier. Now, if you wanted to feel better about the tiers, we could call this S plus S A B, but we're leaving it, all right? Let's just cope together. So Yukong for me, I don't know about you guys, I just find her to be a bit too clunky. Now, you could put her up here and then drag these two up, I'd say, and like maybe that would work, but I think we just leave it like this and that'll be pretty much fine. But Yukong, I was super hyped for Yukong when she was coming out, but then she's just too... I feel like you really have to fine tune a team 100% to her to make her work well. And if you're not really fine tuned, it's not that fun. And to me, that deserves a lower tier because it's like, it's just so much effort to make her useful. So that is my take. Could be a bad take. You guys let me know in the comments. Now we'll move on to the defensive supports. We'll start with the healers. Luocha, this dude just cracked. Just chuck him in a team. Yes, sometimes something gets one shot and you're like, damn, I wish I had a revive. But in general, just set and forget. Put him with a Blade or a Clara. You just walk away, come back. The job's done. That's all you need. It's pretty nice. Honestly, he's an amazing healer. And if he's the best, Bailu's the second best and Natasha's the third best. We're not going to go too deep into that. I feel like that is safe placing. Then, honestly, March and Trailblazer, I feel like same tier is applicable for them. I feel like March has gotten better for those. Like, as people have gotten better gear and progressed further, but still only had the one healer, I feel like March is getting more use as that solo defensive option because she can just freeze the entire enemy team. And I honestly think she's getting better in that aspect, but I feel like it's pretty safe to put them both in the same tier. Now, if you want them both to be in A tier or B tier, that is up to you, but I feel like that is pretty safe placement. I think I forgot to move the Pella back down when I was talking about Yukong, but in general, that is pretty much how I see the tier list. Once again, you could separate C tier into C and D tier, but hey, I ain't getting too finicky. You could bump Pella and Asta up and bring Yukong up one as well. And that's pretty much the main changes you could make if you're trying to get really nitpicky on it. I feel like the rest is pretty safe. But the thing I forgot to mention is Kafka. So where do I think Kafka is going to sit? I think Kafka is going to be either S tier or an A plus tier. I think she's going to be above all of these units, but I don't know if she's going to get into this tier. So I'm curious to see how she falls. It's going to depend on multipliers and all that sort of stuff, but I'm definitely keen to see it. I'm keen to test Kafka more and see, but I feel like she's going to be in that S minus type tier. And it'll be interesting how I put her into this type of tier list if I think she's right in between. Probably put her in the S tier just to keep all the Kafka fans happy. But anyway, guys, that is going to be for this one. Thanks for watching. Hope you have an awesome day, and I look forward to seeing the next one. Cheers.